Welcome to Navigate Your Cloud Journey. I'm your host, Jeff Tunn, Intervision's Strategic IT Advisor. In this three-part webcast series, we are going to explore your cloud journey from the perspective of the CIO and the impacts on his or her people. We begin in part one, transforming your team with the steps you need to take to prepare your team for the journey ahead. In part two, keeping the lights on, we discuss the challenges you face while on the journey and the need to maintain both your new cloud environment as well as your legacy environments. Part three of our series looks at ways you can jumpstart your journey by leveraging AWS managed services in the aptly titled webcast, Jumpstarting with AMS. In part one of this webcast series, we're going to look at transforming your team. The why, and why the why is important. The how, some strategies and techniques you can use to transform your team. And then what to do next, what now, how to take your team on this journey with you. The journey starts with your why. You are on a journey, a cloud journey. You want and need your team to follow. So what is your why? Why cloud? Why now? What's your vision of the future? Can you paint a picture of that future? A picture so compelling that your team can see themselves in that future? I'd like to share a story from my own past. I was CIO for Goodwill of Central Indiana. We were embarking on a cloud journey. Our first steps on that journey were to look at our email system and move that into the cloud. We were using on-premises Exchange with Outlook, and we were up for a large Exchange upgrade as well as a hardware upgrade. And so we thought it would be a great opportunity to look towards the cloud. We created a team to help select the platform, and we narrowed it down to either Microsoft, and at the time it was their BPOS platform, if you remember that, or Google and Google's platform. The team piloted both platforms and then at the end selected Google. In fact, it was a unanimous selection by everybody on the team. We launched the project and began our migration. It was a relatively smooth project. There were some bumps along the way, but we had a successful launch and had converted everybody to the Google platform for email, calendaring, those types of functions. A week after go live, our senior systems engineer walked into my office and resigned. He had always seen himself as an Exchange engineer, loved configuring, maintaining, and optimizing Exchange. He couldn't see himself in the new reality that we had selected, even though he was on the team that helped select the platform, and even though he voted for Google. I had failed to paint a picture for him. I'd failed to paint a picture of the future, his future. He could not see himself in this new environment. So fast forward a year or so, and one of our next steps was to look at our disaster recovery process and tools. And we were, again, looking at a cloud solution, disaster recovery as a service from Blue Lock. At that time, using my lessons learned from the Gmail project, I spent time with the team and my senior engineer. And we talked about what did the future look like when we were done with this project. And we painted a picture together. What was the result of that? Enthusiastic buy-in from my senior systems engineer. In fact, some of the things that he was able to achieve after being done with this project were some of the very things that we had talked about as we were painting the picture. The ability to revamp the retail checkout system was on the top of his list. He was able to successfully do that after freeing up the time that he normally would have spent on disaster recovery testing. Two different approaches, one very successful, and I encourage you to paint that picture. This journey, this cloud journey, is all about change. You're changing tools, a lot of them. You're changing processes, most of them. You're changing people. They will need a new way to think and work. This change must start with the people. You're going to run into some pushback. You will have people on your team, maybe even on your leadership team, that are anxious about this change. They may be the ones that are anxious about any change, but this one in particular may make them nervous. So they'll be anxious. You're pushing them outside of their comfort zone, moving their cheese, so to speak. They may be worried about their job security, not being able to see themselves in the future and wondering if their job is in jeopardy. They may be having a fear of failure because this is new territory for them. They may not be as confident with their skills in this new world. You have to meet them where they are. Let's talk for a minute about what is changing so that you can prepare your team to understand the changes in front of them. So what is changing? Everything is changing. Think of infrastructure as code. You might have heard it as software-defined infrastructure, software-defined networking. It's akin to the transition that many of us faced when we moved from procedural programming languages to object-oriented and ultimately functional programming language. That's the change that your infrastructure team will have to go through. They will be learning to code. They won't have a device to configure and deploy. They will be writing code to deploy multiple devices virtually at the same time. But the change is not limited to your infrastructure team. Your dev team will also have changes. They may be used to writing detailed design documents. In the new world, that's probably going to be your code and code repository where you go for detailed design. They will have to learn how to consume services, hundreds, if not thousands of services available on these cloud platforms. The pace will also be different in the cloud. It might be a much faster pace. Think of pandemic mode versus incrementalism. We've just experienced a rapid change in the way we operate and in the way we work in 2020. That pace was dizzying. There are many companies, many organizations who want to keep up that pace of change or that pandemic mode. Cloud is one of the ways to achieve that. It provides you with that agility to develop and deploy rapidly. It takes an agile mindset, not necessarily agile methodology, although that will definitely be a part of your journey, but that agile mindset that shows respect, collaboration, improvement and learning cycles, pride in ownership, focused on delivery, focused on value, and the ability to adapt to change are all part of the mindset that will be needed throughout your team. So now that you've identified the why and a little bit of the what is changing, how do you prepare your team? How do you lead the change required to go on this journey? I spoke recently with the CIO of a national airline. He was about 2 years into his cloud journey, his team's cloud journey. And I asked him to think back to those initial days. He was a brand new CIO at that organization. And one of the things he was very sure about was that journey to the cloud. But he got a lot of pushback. He got pushback from one of his leaders in particular, who came to him after an all-team meeting with the question, why do we need to change? We are doing just fine. Our uptime numbers are industry leading, and we're able to react to the changes that our business partners require of us. So he pushed back. He was very reluctant to change. This particular CIO sat down with the individual to have a conversation. And part of his explanation was that this change is here. Companies are migrating to the cloud. The future is going to be cloud-based for a large part. And so he asked the question to this senior leader, are we going to be a part of the change, or are we going to be left behind? And then he challenged him. He challenged him to go search for a job. No, he wasn't telling him to leave the organization. He wanted him to go look for senior systems engineer job descriptions online that did not mention cloud. And he wasn't able to do it. He wasn't able to find a senior systems engineer role that did not mention cloud in some way, shape, or form in the job description. That's a comment to the future. That's why we need to change, as he told that senior leader. How do you help guide your team and prepare them for the change? Communication is key. Communicate, 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 early and often. Talk to them about what is changing. Talk to them about why the change. And then ask them, how do we change? If that's our goal, if that's our vision, and we know where we are today, how do we get there? Let them define the process, or at least help define the process. Let them help define the future state. The other thing to do during this communication is to acknowledge the pain of change. Acknowledge that it's going to be hard. Acknowledge that there's going to be challenges ahead of each individual and of the team. And ask, how can you support them during this change? What things can you help with that will help alleviate some of the pain of change? Because of all this communication, one of the key steps you will need to take is to develop a communications plan. And I encourage you to think about it from the perspective of 3 different audiences, because your messaging will probably be different for each of these 3. Your first audience is your full staff. Encourage you to have full staff meetings where you're communicating the vision, the why, and the how. Another audience will be the leadership of your company, not necessarily the leadership of your department, because you will also want to communicate to them the vision, the why, and the how. And then your third audience are the individuals, those members on your team that need an individual message. I'll give you another challenge here. I would challenge you to meet one-on-one with each one of your staff members at least once a year, and maybe twice a year while you're on the journey. Now, that may be dependent upon the size of your team. If you have more than 50 people in your department, that's going to be a challenge to meet with them even once a year. But I encourage you to carve out 30 minutes for each one of the team members and talk to at least 50. If you have an organization of 200, talk to 25% of them. Talk to 50 people, because then you're going to know what their fears are. what their concerns are. That's the only way that you're going to be able to understand how you can help them individually. So make that a part of your communication plan as well. As you're developing this communications plan, consider some additional changes around this journey. Think about your department and identify the champions of change. These are probably the people on your team that are always at the forefront of anything new. They are the early adopters. They are probably already tinkering in the cloud environments. You have them. You know they're there. They probably have servers fired up in AWS, Azure, and Google Compute right now. Identify them, find them, and leverage them as your champions of this change. Consider setting up centers of excellence around your cloud journey. You may want to do this informally as a matrixed team of subject matter experts that get together on a periodic basis to talk about the cloud journey. Or you may want to do it more formally and organize around centers of excellence. Find those pillars of resources. These may not necessarily be the champions of change, but it's the people within your department that have that agile mindset. They're open to the change. They're open to leading the change, and build your processes with them. And then, because we all have them, identify the laggards, those that will get dragged kicking and screaming into the age of cloud. Build around them. Don't slow your process down. Don't slow your journey down to the lowest common denominator. Build anyway. If they are able to, they will come, but don't slow down because of it. You've identified your vision. You've discovered your why. You've painted a picture for your team to follow. You understand what changes are in front of you. What steps do you take to make this happen? I'd like to relate another story. This one from the vice president of technology for a large financial services company. As this CIO related her story to me, she talked about their journey. They started with very small steps. Their clients were very conservative in their approach to risk, and cloud was viewed as risky. As such, the culture of her company was also very conservative in its approach to risk. She emphasized time and time again during our conversation that they had to know their why. There are many benefits to the cloud, but she had to be able to express those benefits in business terms to communicate effectively. She emphasized the agility and the elasticity that cloud brings to the environment, and related that to the times of peak usage that they have within their platforms. Not necessarily seasonal, but there's different times of year when the usage really spikes up and they need to be able to scale horizontally very, very quickly and then bring it back down again, that elasticity. They were always looking for new products, new services to bring to market, and they needed to bring them to market before the competition. That speaks a lot to the agility that cloud brings to an environment. She and her team developed messages for multiple audiences. First, they had to communicate to their own team. She had a large staff, and so her immediate team had the job of communicating to the broader team, and they wanted to make sure those messages resonated with that audience. Then they had to address their internal customers or business partners within the business and the message that would resonate with them. Because of the service industry that they were in, they also had to create a message for their customers to hear. Why were they moving to the cloud? What was the benefit the customer was going to see as a result? And finally, because they're a publicly traded organization, they had to tell the market and the market analysts their story of why the cloud, what's the vision, how they were going to approach it, and what the benefits would be to those stakeholders. In the end, they were able to communicate quite effectively and got the funding for their cloud journey. They are just beginning that journey, and I look forward to additional conversations as they progress along that path. Another thing to keep in mind as you're discussing and thinking about the how to implement these changes is don't underestimate the institutional knowledge. Your internal staff has knowledge that took months, years, potentially longer to build. Knowledge about your organization and the way it works, knowledge about your systems and how they work, knowledge about your industry, knowledge about your customers. Don't hesitate to train your internal staff on cloud. Start now. If you are only just beginning to think about your cloud journey, now's the time to start training. If you're already on your cloud journey, look to train your internal staff immediately. If you have backfills that you need to hire for, hire intentionally. Look for cloud skills that you can bring into your organization to seed talent within your existing team that has that institutional knowledge. The new hires will learn the institutional knowledge, and your existing staff will learn the cloud techniques and skills. The other place to look is a partner. A partner can help you jumpstart this process. They can bring in expertise that can help you along that journey. I encourage you not to take the approach that I've seen a lot of companies do, which is to let the partner come in and implement the cool new technology while the existing team takes care of the legacy environment. That doesn't help you in the long run. You want a partner who will embed their team with yours. So, like the new hire we were just talking about, they will pass on their cloud knowledge to your team. The other reason to look to your partner is for training dollars. Many partners will bring funds that will help you train your staff on cloud practices. They will also leverage the cloud platforms themselves. Those platforms want your workloads running on their cloud. They will bring training dollars to the table as an enticement to move to their cloud. Leverage that. I spoke to one CIO who's several years into their journey, and they have not spent one extra dime on training, yet his entire team has been trained through using partners and the cloud platforms themselves. Are you ready for this journey? Are you ready to take your first steps? If you're on the journey, are you ready for that next bend in the river? Are you prepared for what comes next? 2 keys. Communication. Communicate, communicate, communicate. Can't say that enough. Communicate the vision, communicate the why, communicate the how, and communicate the benefits to your peers and executives. Use business terms. Don't talk tech. And as we've talked, place people first. Think about your people. Think about the career path that you can build for them as you migrate more and more to the cloud. Think about ongoing education and training as they navigate the cloud themselves. Look for part 2 of your cloud journey, Keeping the Lights On, coming soon. Before we wrap, I'd like to share a bit about the Intervision story and our journey together. Intervision is a strategic service provider. That model represents solution providers who become strategic partners to customers, recommending and implementing everything from communication providers to which application platforms and hardware providers to depend on. At Intervision, our mission is to unlock value for you by delivering innovative technology through a consultative approach. We do that by looking at the intersection of the right premises, the right technology, the right model. Whether the premises are the cloud, hosted, or on premises, or a mixture of all three. The right technology, including digital infrastructure, resiliency, and digital communications from the right vendors for you. And the right model, managed services, professional services, and self-service. It's that intersection that enables us to deliver that value to you in your situation. Intervision began as a premier data center partner in Silicon Valley. We've grown organically as well as through acquisition. Some of the key acquisitions that we've made that lend value to you are our acquisition of Nettelligent, a premier Cisco voice and networking platform. ITG, focused on the media, entertainment, and gaming industries. BlueLock, a leader in disaster recovery as a service. Infinity, an AWS premier partner. Cevu, machine learning and artificial intelligence. And Fotis, with 20 years of professional services in security and compliance. We have 125 certified engineers with over 200 cloud certifications, supporting over 80 different vendor technologies. That speaks again to the intersection of the right premises, the right technology, and the right model. We use a follow the sun methodology for operational support, so we are available to you 24/7, 365. We talked earlier about centers of excellence, and Intervision ourselves have organized around centers of excellence. We have 7: hosting, security, cloud, consulting, AI and machine learning, communications, and infrastructure. Many of these mix across disciplines, but because we've organized this way, we're able to deliver solutions to you across that spectrum. I mentioned earlier, we partner with over 80 different technologies. You'll see some of those brands here on this slide. What's important for you, though, is the level at which we work with and partner with these technology companies. We are not only embedded deep within their engineering staff, but we have relationships at the executive level and help drive their product roadmaps. Some of these logos may be familiar to you, but I encourage you to look at the industries and the industry experience that we can bring to the table. Even if you don't find your industry listed here, you're probably in an industry that's adjacent to one of these. We bring that deep expertise to providing the solutions to you. At Intervision, our vision is to transform business through the evolutionary power of technology. Thank you very much for joining us today, and be on the lookout for part 2 in this series, Keeping the Lights On. Until then, this is Jeff Tunn, Strategic IT Advisor for Intervision. Thank you.